Good morning, ladies and gents. It's the 3rd of June, 2024, and we'll pick up from where we sort of left off on part one. Just to recap, part one was a lengthy video, but with the amount of information needed to sort of deliver, it couldn't have been done any quicker, to be honest. By now, and from that video, you should have sort of basic understanding of low, medium, and high risks to the UK as a result of war and conflict unfolding across the globe. You'll have an understanding of some missile statistics, and more importantly, some of the sort of likely targets and their locations here in the UK. If in fact, an enemy wanted to sort of launch a missile at the United Kingdom. Finally, you should also now know some details around the UK's sort of defence and deterrent systems. Again, that was just really sort of explained at a very high level overview. But enough of that bollocks. Let's move on. I wanted to sort of just freestyle part two and just show you, how to sort of use the NukeMap website. That kind of allows the user to sort of simulate a nuclear attack, meaning that you can sort of enter details into the simulator, such as sort of missile characteristics, like the yield and the type, and then you simply sort of detonate the missile on the simulator on any location and just see what the effects of the explosion would be. The only I only sort of provided screenshots of that NukeMap simulation across various different sort of primary targets that I'd sort of identified in the UK on the part one video. So I kind of took a screenshot and then just presented that in some slides. What I want to be doing though is I want to be sort of just showing you how NukeMap works. So you guys can sort of go off, launch NukeMap and just do your own sort of simulations based on where you live in the UK. And you will probably come up with other kind of possible targets in the UK. Just because I've listed 30 to 40 of them doesn't mean that there aren't any others. NukeMap is what I'm going to do first. Let me just bring you'll see from the screen I've got a browser. Just open Google and just type in NukeMap. NukeMap is it's an interactive map using Mapbox API and declassified nuclear weapons effects data, created by somebody called Alex Wellenstein, who's by the looks of it, a historian of science at the Stevens Institute of Technology, who studies the history of nuclear weapons. So yeah, NukeMap into Google, and then off we go. When using the term, firstly, I want to do, and I've done this on a couple of my other videos, I want to just put out, before I start, I just want to sort of put out a quick disclaimer before we kick things off. When using the term nuclear war, or nuclear attack, this by no means means the end of the world, the apocalypse, the end of days as we know it, or any other kind of madness. I do not know whether or not such an attack, on this scale is likely to happen here in the UK. And much of what I say and what you sort of see on this video will pretty much just be based on sort of speculation. I'm here really to sort of point out some facts and figures and just merely highlight to you the possibilities. And I won't be able to continue with this series of videos without sort of providing you with this information on such threats on the United Kingdom first, because we just can't begin to sort of prepare without fully understanding the possible threats first. So if you've watched part one, then you'll remember that I covered around, I think it was either 30 or 40 possible counter force and counter value targets here in the UK. Just to remind you though, a counter force target is generally a military target, and a counter value target tends to be a civilian target. And if you haven't watched part one, I would suggest that you sort of watch that before really watching this one, because there are sort of sort of facts and abbreviations and some it's just general information in there that I'm going to mention in this, and I don't want to have to sort of go through the same sort of information again because that just wastes your time. I'm just going to go through and simulate some of these primary targets on NukeMap so that I can sort of explain how to use the online website, and also really just to allow you to sort of see what this means to you, depending on where you live, obviously. The list we'll go through, it is a list of UK targets that I've identified here in the UK. You may know or have other targets, depending on where you live and your knowledge. You know, you just might think of other targets that you can add to your own list when you sort of open NukeMap yourself and go through the simulation, and you just create your own. You create your own sort of batch of information, really, depending, like I say, depending on where you live and what your circumstances are. For these simulations, I've chosen a fake home location, and I've tried to sort of kind of choose somewhere in the middle of the UK or in the Midlands at least. So I've chosen a place called Coventry, which I think is not far from Birmingham. You will, well, you won't see. I will mention miles in the list of targets. So when I put these targets, these potential targets into NukeMap, I will just quickly mention the miles in terms of the distance between Coventry and that potential target. The metric for you when you run your own sort of simulations is important, because as part of your assessment, you should be looking at those immediate questions. I mentioned them in part one. There are immediate questions that you should be asking yourself following any such attack. And again, it's really just for you to determine what's happened, why it's happened, and what are the effects, really. So the things that you need to be looking at are, well, you need to be asking yourself the first and foremost, you want to know where that attack is or was. You want to know what type of attack we're talking about. What was the damage caused? And then what are the weather conditions at that time? So when you're asking yourself those questions, you want to take, quite a critical note of what the weather conditions are outside and also around, the area of the impact. You'll want to know things like the direction of the wind. So in which direction is the wind blowing? And at what speed? You'll also want to know whether it's raining, sunny, snowing, or just mild and cloudy. But I'm going to show you the reasons why this information is important. Okay, let's just move on. What I'm going to do is we've got the web browser open. We've Googled NukeMap, and we're just going to click on this top option there. That takes you straight into NukeMap. It should default to the capital of this country, that being London. Now, there's not many options. This is not a complex or complicated simulator to use. You've got very limited options, and we're just going to go through them quickly with you. First and foremost, it says there, number one, so drag the marker to wherever you like the target to be. So that marker is going to be this pin drop, and you can move it to anywhere. If, for example, the missile or whatever the explosion or the detonation is, you would place that marker there, and that's where that's where you would expect the bomb to land, shall we say. So, for example, there, Mile End. Now, I'm not going to. I'm just showing you this, this pin drop, so you can kind of move that about. What we'll be doing is we'll be going through the list of primary targets that I've identified, and we'll be moving that marker to those locations. Now, if you are not sure where those locations are, what you can do is just type in the location here, click go, and then the marker will automatically go there. So if we just put Coventry in there, go to go, and then NukeMap will take you to that location. whilst whilst we're looking at this, and I sort of just outlined the importance of the weather, I would suggest that for this simulation that we would open up a weather site, shall we say. I was going to say an app. I'm on a laptop, so I'm not on a phone, but I've opened the Met Office weather app. Now, what I wanted to point out here, this is going to be this is going to be apparent, or it'll come together in a minute. The weather, in terms of the strength of the wind and the direction of the wind, is critical information for you to know if there is an attack in the UK of that nature, that kind of nature. When I say that nature, I mean a nuclear explosion, whether that is an airburst or a ground burst. So for this simulation, before we look at the wind speeds and directions, I just want to point out that the prevailing winds are generally from the west to south for the UK. So we have winds traveling in from left to right, going eastwards, coming across the Atlantic, normally encouraged by the jet stream. That's for the most part of the year. So I just wanted to sort of mention that quickly. Now, for today, we have got westerly winds, but they're coming in from the north instead of the south. So we've got, west to south, west to north, northerly winds. And these numbers here are sort of signifying the speed, 7 miles an hour winds, 8 mile an hour. So fairly light winds. Now back to NukeMap. We've got next, we can choose the warhead. That's the yield. I've mentioned the yield in part one and what that actually means. For example, the atomic bomb used in Nagasaki in Japan in 1945 by the US was a 20 kiloton bomb. So, for example, we could put 20 kilotons in there. This is measured in kilotons, and we can select also whether it's a surface or airburst missile. If you are familiar with different types of missiles from back in the day, we've got a drop-down menu here. We can choose a warhead yield manually, or we can actually choose the actual missile type. So the Hiroshima bomb was something called a little boy missile. That was a 15 kiloton. Where's the Nagasaki? There's a Nagasaki in there somewhere, I would believe. Let's just stick with, oh yeah, Nagasaki there. Okay, so that's the 20 kiloton. Or you can, like I say, you can put 20 kilotons in there, or you can just select the bomb. We select whether it's an airburst or surface burst. Now, the Nagasaki atomic bomb was a surface or ground burst. Okay, so which means it exploded when it hit the ground as opposed to exploding above. Now we can have a look at the effects, other effects. So we can choose the casualties and also the radioactive fallout. So what I'm going to simulate here, this is Coventry. I'm just going to come out, I'm going to zoom out, and I'm just going to detonate a 20 kiloton surface or ground burst missile in Coventry. And what you'll see straight away is the estimated fatalities and the estimated injuries. I'm going to zoom out so we can kind of see what that actually means. So that detonation is in Coventry, and what you'll see there is a fallout cloud. I'm not going to tell you about those different levels of fallout, nor am I going to say about the radiuses on this Coventry one. What I'm going to do is go through and show you those metrics on primary targets. Coventry wouldn't be a primary target. There's nothing in Coventry that's of any value to anybody, certainly in terms of counter value or counter force. So I just wanted to sort of show you those options here. And that's pretty much it. We're going to clear that, and I'm going to just start that again. So Going back in, I just want to default it to, this is what you're going to see when you open NukeMap. You're going to get a pin drop into London, and then that's it. We start again. I'm going to go through some of these primary counterforce targets. I'm going to show you, what the impact would be, the casualties, and what you're looking for here. Again, different viewers are going to be located in different parts of the country, but I just want you to kind of understand the level of impact. And one of the main messages I want to get across here is that although there are going to be casualties and injuries, if I was to say to somebody, there's going to be 150 kiloton ground burst or surface burst nuclear weapon detonated in some part of the country, then 9 times out of 10, most people are just going to automatically think that that's the end of the day. That's it. It's finished. The country's done, because they don't have an understanding of things like the warhead yield or the missile yield and what that means in terms of impact and damage. So I just want to sort of show that to you, because there's so many myths out there in and around the nuclear and the radioactive subjects that many of them can actually be sort of discounted or dismissed, shall we say. I'm going to start with, so let's just assume for this simulation, let's just come out of here. I'm going to zoom out. Actually, just before we go on quickly, I'm going to zoom out. I want to get this message across. I think I mentioned it in part one, but I didn't show any sort of evidence of this on a map or any example. So I'm going to zoom right out. So now, for any of you, and I know there might be some, for any of you that don't know where the Ukraine is or how far it is from the UK, I'm just going to show you. Obviously, we've got the United Kingdom and Ireland. And then over here to the east is the Ukraine. And then just on its border is Russia. Okay. Anything in between are European countries. Most of you will be sort of fairly familiar with all of those. Okay. So I just want to show you, how close that is. That's approximately, if you drive from there to the Ukraine, as in its border, I think it's about 1,380 miles to the border, and it's a little bit, obviously, a couple of hundred more miles into the capital of Ukraine. Okay, that's not far. It should take you, if you was going to drive and you weren't hit by too much traffic, about 31 hours. Some of you will be saying, well, if a missile if we've got an enemy like Russia launching missiles at the UK, and they, let's say, fly out of either along the border, St. Petersburg or Moscow, the likelihood of us seeing them come is highly likely. Even hypersonics, you're going to know that they're on their way. So the mentality really is going to be, well, we're far enough away to be in a safe place. Now, that statement couldn't be any further from the truth. Because I mentioned in part one that Russia is a superpower and it has a nuclear triad. That means that it can launch nuclear weapons from its mainland, whether that's silos or mobile launchers. They can have bombers up in the air, flying over and dropping bombs. But the most threatening option out of that triad is going to be launching such weapons from submarines, nuclear submarines. And the UK has 4 submarines in its submarine class that are operational and active. We don't have any more than that. I know there's talk of, the UK government building more, but, that takes years. But just to put that into perspective, in comparison to, let's say, the Russian submarine fleet, the size of Russia's naval submarine fleet is 58 submarines, 11 of which are ballistic missile submarines, and 17 of which are nuclear powered. Okay, so in comparison to what we've got, there's a massive difference there. So what I'm trying to say here is the likelihood of a submarine being sat off the coast of Scotland, Ireland, Wales, or the United Kingdom anywhere is highly likely. They've got enough submarines to be distributed around the world. They're very hard to detect. Okay, submarines are very, very hard to detect. That's really the beauty of them, and that's the stealth, the stealth ability that they have. So if, and this is highly likely, if we were going to be attacked, it's likely to come in the form of a missile, but launched from a submarine that could be located anywhere here. Now, if that's the case, you've got a couple of minutes warning. You're not going to get that couple of minutes warning. The military and the government will get that warning first. That's not going to be much of a warning for them, let alone the likes of me and you on the street. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that if you think that we are located so far away that we're in a safe place, don't be disillusioned. But I just want to get that across. Okay, so that was just that. I'm gonna start putting in these primary targets. So now we're on the understanding that there could be Russian submarines just sat here off of our coasts. Let's look at the targets that the Russian military could be looking at. Again, we're looking at Coventry as your home location. Let's just say, for instance, so Coventry was here somewhere there, I think. RAF Barford St John's. So that is, no, I'm not going to use that. That is just it's a kind of training place. RAF Crawton in Buckinghamshire. Basically what I'm doing is I'm copying and pasting. So rather than type it, I'm just going to paste it in here, and then I'm just going to click go. That should pin drop that location. So now we've got the target. Okay, that's what the Russians are going to take out. The reason why they're going to take that out is because it's a US Air Force communication station, so it's a primary target. We're then going to select the missile yield, as in the yield in the form of TNT crammed into the warhead of the missile. We're going to use 150 kilotons. That's 10 times the size of the atomic bombs dropped in Japan in 1945. I'm going to choose a airburst because the likelihood of airbursts being used is more highly likely if it's a counterforce target, that being a military target, because they just want to concentrate taking out that military facility or installation and not really causing too much damage outside of that. If they wanted to cause damage outside of that, you'd be presenting a surface burst, and then obviously with that you've got fallout, which can be sort of devastating in itself. So the other options you've got here, so we've got airburst or surface burst. So we're choosing airburst in this demonstration, and then we can checkbox the casualties. It's going to tell us how many casualties in terms of fatalities and injuries that are going to be caused. And then we're also going to look at radioactive fallout, not for the airburst so much, for the surface burst, but we're going to tick that. And then all you do from that point onwards is just click detonate. And you'll see the fatalities and injuries being calculated there. And you'll see a number of rings there, circles, they're radiuses, of which there are 5, I think. So I'm just going to explain them to you just on this location, and then when we go through the other locations, there shouldn't be a need for me to explain them again. This is really for you to just understand what these these radiuses mean. So then when you go and open NukeMap, you can see whether you're in the blast zone, or you're in a fireball radius, or the radiation one. So I'm just going to go through them quickly. When I go through these, if you put your mouse pointer on any of these radiuses, you'll see that the radius will sort of light up in white or blink. So for instance there, let's start with this one, the fireball radius, sorry. Damage is going to be catastrophic here in that radius. Pretty much anything inside of it is going to be vaporized. That's it. Now, whether that was a nuclear bomb or not, the effects would be the same. If you had a 150 kiloton normal missile with or without radioactive material, whatever, it's gonna wipe out anything within that radius. Straight after that, you've got what they call a radiation radius. Now, again, here you'll see that there are measurements here as well. So that radius there is approximately 1 kilometer in diameter. Anything that's in here, you've got ionizing radiation dose, so likely fatal within a month. And then 15% of the survivors will eventually die of cancer as a result of the exposure. We've then got what they call a moderate blast damage radius of about 3.7 kilometers. Most residential buildings collapse. Injuries are universal. Fatalities are widespread. The chances of fire starting in commercial and residential damage are high, and buildings so damaged are at a high risk of spreading fire. You've then got what they call the thermal radiation radius. Now, this is 5.2 kilometers in diameter, and you're looking at third-degree burns here, extended throughout the layers of skin. And you've got 100% probability of third-degree burns at a yield of whatever that is. So basically, if you're within that radius and you're outside when that happens, you are going to get third-degree burns. Okay. And then last but not least, we're going to look at the light blast damage radius. That is going to that's going to be causing things like windows to break, smash. This can cause many injuries, and the reason for that is because once, let's say for example, you're in this radius here, you're in a place called Whitfield, and that detonation goes off. The first thing you're going to do, you're going to see a flash of light, a really bright light, and human instinct is going to be to go to the window and have a look just to see what that was. Unfortunately, straight after that sort of bright light, you're going to get a shockwave a number of seconds after. So if you're stood at a window and you get that shockwave, that glass is going to cut you to shreds. So that's where your injuries really sort of ramp up because of that very reason, as well as other stuff. So I just wanted to get that across. What you will see is this windsock on here. You can grab hold of that and then kind of move it around. And basically what that allows you to do is just move the direction of the wind. That's not really useful when we're talking about this airburst, because the explosion is happening above your heads as opposed to on the ground. This comes into its own when we start looking at the surface or ground burst. Right, so now I've gone through those radiuses. Hopefully you understand that. I'm just going to zoom out. Now, although there's 6,200 fatalities and 18,000 injuries, if you zoom out, in terms of the size of the country, it's relatively small. Now, I know that's catastrophic in terms of numbers. None of that's nice or nothing to worry about, should we say. But what I'm trying to say is that if someone says, that there's going to be a 150 kiloton ground burst missile hitting Birmingham, then don't think for 1 minute that everybody in the UK is finished, because that's clearly not the case. Okay, so it's really just to get rid of some of these myths that are out there, sort of attaching themselves to sort of nuclear statements, and also statements in and around sort of radiation. I won't go into any of those myths now. Let's just get these primary targets out the way. So that's one primary target. Another one is going to be RAF Verizon Norton. So I'm just going to paste that in there, click go. We're going to stick to the yield, and we're going to stick to an airburst as well. So click detonate, and then that will just calculate your fatalities and injuries. Okay, once we've got that, I tend to sort of zoom out and just have a look at the surrounding areas. So if you live in Gloucester or Oxford, you're going to know about this, but you're not going to be, part of these metrics here. You're not in those radiuses, so you're in a safe place, should we say, but you will know about it, because it's not just about fatalities and injuries, it's the damage that's caused, and that's damage to the surrounding infrastructure. whether that's the electricity grid, whether that's water supplies, whether that's any other services that you rely on. Brize Norton, Oxfordshire, is 51 miles away from Coventry, and it's an air mobility force, and there's over 6,000 personnel there, so that would be a primary target. Another one would be RAF Whittington in Peterborough. That is a main operating base and headquarters. So again, another primary site. You will find actually from my list and from your own list, if you're going to research counter force or military targets in the UK, that there are a number of military bases in and around Peterborough and Huntingdon, and your other locations to be aware of are Suffolk, Lincolnshire, Oxford. So there seems to be 2 or 3 bases in those areas. Next one, we're going to look at a place called RAF Molesworth. That's in Huntingdon. We're going to paste that in there. We're going to go, let's detonate. That's 55 miles away from Coventry. It's a combat support wing. It's a ground launch cruise missile location. It's also intelligence. So that would be on, on the list of targets I would expect. Zooming out, surrounding areas, again, Peterborough, Birmingham, Milton Keynes, Cambridge, that kind of thing. But you're out of the danger zone. The danger zone is within this radius. RAF Whiten. Again, Huntingdon, 55 miles away from Coventry. It's a strategic command station. So yes, a primary target. Again, we've got RAF Fairford in Oxford, another primary target. This is a forward operating location. You've got heavy bombers located there, and it's also the bomber task force. So this would be near the top of the list of primary targets. Because you've got bombers that are capable of carrying nuclear weapons. So, they'll fly out of RAF Fairford on their way to Russia or wherever. So that's an immediate threat. Did I detonate that? Let's just check. Okay, yeah. So you can see Oxfordshire. There's 2 or 3 others there. I'm not going to go through those now. What I am going to do is those. So what I'm trying to say is, if you lived in Coventry, a lot of these primary counter force targets are not likely to affect you if the missile is there. It's sort of around the 150 kilotons and it's an airburst. This only changes those metrics when it becomes a surface burst or a ground burst missile, but we'll go through that and simulate that in a minute. What I am going to do is just show you a couple of other locations that are primary targets in this country. So you might live in these areas. That's the reason why I'm just going to go through them quickly. We've got RAF Flyingdales. This is what they call, it's a radar base. It's a remote radar base, of which I think there's 2 main ones in the UK. So that's it's not communications. It is a kind of form of communications and intelligence. It's it can see things coming. So if you want the country or your enemy to be blind, then you would take out this radar base and the other one, which is, I can't remember where that is, but we'll come across it in a minute. So again, this where is this? This is North Yorkshire. So not a very highly populated place, and probably not too many people working at that location. Is it primary base? It's primary target because it's a radar base. So you just want to take out that service, not necessarily kill all of the personnel there. We have RAF Benson. RAF Benson is in South Oxfordshire. It's a frontline base and helicopter support. So primary target, not necessarily for me. Helicopter support. Your helicopters really to provide support locally. You know, sort of, let's say, for instance, you get one of these airbursts going off at a US air base in the UK. You would expect these guys to spring into action to start delivering aid and getting in there and sort of, you know, it's kind of, it's a support wing. So is it a primary target? No. It could be a secondary target, yes, to prevent that support going into the location that you've just primarily taken out. That's 67 miles away from, where was we using? Coventry, sorry. RAF High Wycombe. Now, I hadn't heard of this one, but it's a headquarters air command. So a primary target. But what did shock me about this is the fatalities and estimated injuries. So I'm just going to put the pointer there. That's what we've got. And looking at the surrounding areas, it must be a highly populated area. I'm going to detonate. I think this is the one, but the numbers I just thought were really quite high. Estimated fatalities is 46,000, and injuries nearly 70,000. So there must be a lot of people living in and around this area. We've got, I'm just going to go through a couple more which are quite critical. We've got RAF Waddington, which is in Lincolnshire. RAF's busiest station as a hub for UK intelligence. So this would be near the top of the list of targets. Let's detonate and just see what that gives us in terms of human damage. So if you're anywhere near Lincoln, you're going to feel the effects of that, certainly within that radius there, which is your light blast damage. So don't be standing by the windows if you see that bright light, you know. And then when you, again, like I say, when you zoom out, this is why I kind of sort of look at trying to sort of think from the enemy's perspective, what they will be looking at doing. I would have thought, rather than kill millions of people in the UK, you're going to want to be taking out strategically placed, positioned, or presented locations. Again, like I say, counter force is going to be, you know, most of them. Now, with that 150 kiloton airburst detonating above that airbase, airbase, sorry, you've achieved your objective. Of course, there are fatalities and stuff like that, but in terms of the rest of the country, the damage is relatively small. Does that make sense? But what I'm trying to say is, when we talk about nuclear war, it doesn't mean all-out war and the end of days. That's why I think I may have mentioned in part one that I actually believe a tactical nuke will be used in the Ukraine, because of this reason. They are really kind of designed to take out specific military installations, and that's what you need to have the capability to do to win the battle, not necessarily the war, the battle. A couple more. We've got RAF Northolt, which is West London. Now, this one is the RAF squadron sort of stationed. It's not stationed. The RAF squadron are stationed there, but is that a primary target? I maybe. It's hard to say. The downside to this is the location, and I would expect the fatalities and injuries to be quite high, because it's in the capital. So, you know, that is your downside. I would maybe expect, if you was going to be going in for Northolt, as in the RAF Northolt, I would probably put a smaller warhead on that, let's say 50 or even 25, the same as, you know, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So if you change that to 20, let's just say, for example, let's detonate that, those numbers will come down. The radius is kind of smaller, but it's likely to have done its job. Hopefully that makes sense. The only other two I want to cover, or there's three actually, is the US Air Force Air Base in Mildenhall, which is Suffolk. That's quite a big one, and it's a US one as well. Like I was saying to you, you know, if you can take out a US target in the UK, that's a plus for Putin and his boys. In terms of damage, you know, sort of human collateral, then Yeah, the numbers are still there. Um, it's also is I mean that air base is a US Air Force forward base and air refueling. So they'll have aircraft on the tarmac there ready to zip up into the air and refuel, I don't know, bombers and jets and various other aircraft. So it just keeps the operation going. Lakenheath, US Air Force Lakenheath is just south or just north of this air base here. They're both quite close together, Mildenhall and Lakenheath, I believe. What I've done actually, I've kept that on 20. I'm going to change that back because these air bases, especially if they're US Air Force bases and they're kind of primary targets in terms of, I mean, this one, Lakenheath, is quite a primary one. I would put this right up there. You've got the 48 fighter wing there, which is, those are the guys that are flying your F-35s, all capable of carrying nuclear missiles or bombs. So you'd be looking at taking this out. I would expect. Did I just detonate that? I'm not too sure whether I did. But yeah, that would be, I think that would be right up there. Two more I'm going to show you because they're just slightly different. They are slightly different types of bases. We've got, I'm not sure if this is going to come up. I'm not sure if it's going to recognize RRH. Gold Coast, no, that's the US. So let's just get rid of that and let's just do the UK. Leeds. Is that where that is? Okay. Yorkshire. So Staxton Wald is what they call a remote radar head. Okay, so it's another communication center or radar site. That would be, quite a critical location to take out. The other type could be a naval base, Her Majesty's Naval Base down in Portsmouth. So that's a HM naval base, home to 2/3 of the Navy's surface ships. So again, yep, this one I want to sort of show you in respect to how easy it would be to take out. Again, I don't know about what they have off the coast here, but Russia could easily have a sub in here somewhere and launch an airburst missile, 150 kiloton airburst above Portsmouth, and all bets are off. That's it. It's go time. So, like I say, when you're on the coast as well, it makes it a whole lot easier. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I think Russia's upper hand would be submarines. That's it. It just places their firepower closer to the target if the UK mainland is the target. Finally, this one's quite important, and this is going to be up north in Scotland. And the reason why HMNB or Her Majesty's Naval Base Clyde is important is because it's home to the UK's nuclear weapons and also nuclear submarines. So that is definitely a primary target. And to have a Russian sub, anywhere in and around here, sat at the bottom of the seabed, is more likely than, let's say, missiles flying over from the east. We'd see them coming. Okay, so anyway, those are the counterforce targets. I'm just going to go through a couple of counter value targets, but what we're going to do here is I want to just simulate a surface burst. Okay, so we're going to change it to surface burst. We're going to keep it to 150 kilotons. What I'm going to do is let's have a look at the types of counter value. We're going to start off with the Port of Felixstowe. It's going to be a container yard. There's a lot of imports, exports. So, it's a critical infrastructure target. And yes, it could be hit to destabilize the infrastructure within this country. So the Port of Felixstowe is there. what hasn't happened, I'm going to change that to surface. We'll keep the casualties and the radioactive fallout. The radioactive fallout will come into its own. So as you can see here, if this was an airburst, this is the kind of damage that people within that radius are likely to be affected. If I detonate this, we now get a different graphic. Of course, we've got the radiuses because the radiuses are still going to apply. But what they've added on here for this ground or surface burst is a fallout cloud. Again, you've got different strengths of radiation and in different parts of that radiation cloud. So I'm not going to talk about radiation in this. I kind of quickly mentioned it in part one, and I'll do a completely different video on what radiation means to you and your family and friends, to you physically, and everything else around you. But this fallout contour is equaling 1,000 rads. You're pretty much done in that, to be honest. That fallout cloud there, or in terms of the level of radiation there, is going to be 100 rads. The fallout contour there is going to be 10 rads. And then outside of that, you've got 1 rad. It's kind of a low, radioactive fallout metric, shall we say. Moving back onto the weather. Okay, now this is where the weather metrics come into their own. I said that the prevailing winds are west southerly, so they come in from the west and south normally. Today, that's actually not the case. It's slightly different. We've got west northerly when it decides to present that information. Right, okay. Yeah, west northerly. So we've got winds coming in from the west north. So if we have a look here, I think I might have said, and it's not going to be on there. I don't know why it's done that. There should be that windsock there, which would allow me to move this cloud. I'm going to get rid of that. Just refresh NukeMap. Bring that back up. Report of Felixstowe. Bring it in there. We're going to stick to the 150 kiloton. We're going to go for surface burst, and we want casualties and radioactive. Right, detonate. And we've got the windsock there. Right, so what that allows you to do, if you can grab hold of that windsock and move it, okay, and what that would give you is the ability to change the direction of the cloud. So that is today's wind's direction. So if the surface burst or the ground burst missile hits Felixstowe, anyone in the UK is fairly safe from any fallout. However, these guys over in France are not so. They're likely to get some kind of fallout. If that target changes and it's over at, I don't know, Microsoft Azure's data center. So that's basically, a data center full of thousands of servers that allow you to jump onto Office 365 or any other cloud platform that you might have. Let's change that to, I'm just going to put London. They've got 2. They've got one in London and one in Cardiff. Let's do Cardiff, actually. So let's just go. So in Cardiff, if a 150 surface burst or ground burst missile goes off, the fallout, the radioactive fallout from that today would be going in that direction. So anything in that path is going to be at risk, shall we say. You're more likely, obviously, to be at risk if you're out shopping or out in the street or playing football or just out walking the dog. You're not going to be in danger straight away. If we look at the weather map, I'm not sure. Those speeds of the wind were, I don't know, anywhere between 6 and 12 mile an hour. Okay. So you've got to then be able to sort of calculate the mileage from Cardiff to, let's say, for instance, you're living in Salisbury. I don't know how many miles that is, But what you've got to say to yourself, if that's 100 miles, let's just say, for example, you've got to divide 100 miles by those wind speeds to calculate how long it's going to take for that fallout cloud to reach you in Salisbury. So if you need to bug out, you grab your shit, you get your bug out shit in your car, and you start traveling north or south. Okay, north, just to get out of that fallout clouds path, shall we say? Okay, so you can get out of the way. Again, it's just, you've got to make those calculations, and that's why the weather is so critical in terms of you making an assessment on what you're going to do next. We'll cover that in more detail when we talk about radiation, home sealment, and personal protection and things like that. But I just want to sort of show you the difference between an airburst in terms of its impact and radiuses, and also a ground burst, because obviously we have to consider the fallout. The fallout is going to be, that's going to be the killer, really, because it's carrying and dropping radiation within its path of travel. So I'm not going to go on any more about that. I just wanted to sort of put that out there just so you understand. Even when we look at this, if we zoom out, and I know the fatalities and the casualties are quite high, certainly for the people in Cardiff, they're going to have pretty much no hope here at all. You've got fatalities of 72,000 and over 100,000 injuries. That's going to be here at the time of detonation, but those numbers are definitely going to rise significantly because of the fallout. People exposed to radiation, people that haven't prepared themselves, therefore haven't protected themselves, and wouldn't know what to do or where to go in terms of shielding, and all the subjects that I'm going to cover, and other prepping channels do cover. Like I said to you, there's lots of videos out there. There's some good UK, US, and also European prepping channels. They've all pretty much got some level of advice, help, and information on these matters, but I'll cover them as well. Okay, so that's it. Again, if I just zoom out, and the first thing you guys are going to see is a picture of a mushroom cloud on the front of your social media platform, the news. It will be breaking news. It will be on the fronts of the papers and stuff like that. And when people see that, they're just going to think, oh, well, that's it. We're all done. Okay, that's actually not the case. If only one of these missiles is launched and it's detonated on mainland Britain, and it's unfortunately Cardiff, then this is where the damage is here. Anyone living anywhere else is not likely to be affected by that detonation. They will be affected by what comes afterwards in terms of critical infrastructure being down, and everything else. Okay, so I just want to emphasize that just because a nuclear bomb goes off in this country, it doesn't mean that that's it, we're all finished. I'm not going to say any more about that. I just I don't want to sort of be beating the drum about it. I just kind of want to get that kind of aspect of all of this over to you, because if you go into this thinking, well, if a nuclear weapon is detonated, we're all done, then you might as well not even bother preparing. Therefore, you might as well not even bother watching any of these channels for any advice. Okay, so that's the only reason why I'm saying this, and that's the other reason why I want to get this information across to you, just to help you guys out. That's it on that. That's NukeMap. It's a very easy application or site to use. There's only 2 or 3 bits that you need to put in here, and bang, that's it. Give it a go. Obviously, look at where you're located. Look at the potential targets. I'm going to provide a list of targets. I think I did in part 1 most of the potential primary targets here in the UK. Look at those, where they're located, look at where you live, and then just run this simulator, and just see if you're in danger. Okay, that's first and foremost. If you are, then you make preparations based on how you are going to protect yourself from those dangers. If you're not, or you might be, because remember, if that wind direction changes and its speed, you could be in danger. You might not be in danger today, but tomorrow you might be. Okay, so you just need to be ready for it. I'm going to leave it there. and I'm going to start preparing videos based on your water, your food, your shelter, and all of those normal, those normal sort of prepping subjects, as it were, really. Okay. Hopefully you found this useful, and I'll speak to you soon.